Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles. I'm here with the plucky and patriotic community of paid subscribers here at Hopium. We get together a few times a month on Wednesday nights. So if you're watching this recording, this will have already passed. But for those of you who are here, welcome. I'll go for 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion up until the top of the hour. Lincoln will be reading your questions and giving me feedback as we go along, so I get a sense of what's on your mind and what people are most interested in for the Q&A. And let me say that I've given a lot of presentations in the last couple of days, and I think one of the things I want to talk about tonight is this notion that the big lie of this time, and there are many medium and small lies, but the big lie coming from Trump world is that he has a plan to make things better for America. That's not true. His economic strategy is going to leave us poorer permanently. His foreign policy will make us weaker and far less safe permanently, and his attack on our democracy will make us less free permanently. He has no strategy to make things better or to make America great. His strategy, the one that he's implementing, is actually going to ensure, let me just fix my camera here, that America is diminished and that we're smaller and we're poorer and less healthy and less free. And that's why we're fighting. Because at the end of the day, this promise that he made, that he had a strategy and a plan to make things better, is just bullshit. And it's a lie. And we have to continue to expose this lie. Look, let's go down the list, right? Number one, the economy. He has, in a very short period of time, taken one of the strongest American economies in all of our history and turned it into a mess. We've seen now that the economy is clearly slowed. Today, the Fed acknowledged that inflation was going to potentially rise, in the forecast, and growth was going to slow. We've had forecast after forecast now from around the world saying that because of the United States and our tariffs and Trump's wild, reckless economic policies, that global growth is slowing down. And while inflation will not increase around the world, it will increase here, right? So he's literally purposely taking one of the strongest economies that America's ever had and slowing it down, potentially pushing us into recession, if you believe these GDP numbers from the Atlanta Fed that I've been sharing with you. We've seen a 6-point decline in the GDP forecast in the last few weeks. As I wrote to you earlier this week, arguably the most astonishing piece of data or any graph or chart that I've ever seen since I've been in this business, the kind of wrecking ball nature of that. We know prices are going to go up, and we know that the Fed did not cut interest rates today, right? So interest rates are staying at an elevated level, causing everything to cost more in the United States, and that Donald Trump, by also unraveling our scientific and medical ecosystems in the United States, by making it harder for immigrants to come to America, because who's going to want to come here after everything he's doing, disappearing people, that those other things that he's doing and wrecking the U.S. government itself, making it less capable of serving the American people. His economic plan is going to give huge tax cuts to wealthy people and cut health care for 80 million Americans, while exploding the deficit. It is what we know that what he's doing is that his economic strategy for America will make us poorer, less healthy, have higher deficits, slower growth permanently. There is no modern economic understanding of modern economics that what he is putting into place with his tariffs and everything else will someday in the future make us more prosperous than we are today. That just cannot happen. To a great degree, because what he's doing is destroying what may be the most important driver of our prosperity, or central drivers of our prosperity, our ability to sell our goods all over the world, right? through a global trading system that has dramatically benefited the United States for a very long period of time. And second of all, has his dismantling of the medical and scientific ecosystem is going to remove from us the ability to keep our leading edge scientifically, medically, in terms of technology, that we will lose that edge to other countries on purpose, right? It's self-sabotage. So number one is that he is an economic wrecking ball. He's making us poorer, less healthy, with higher deficits and more concentration of wealth at the upper end and less for everybody else. And so his argument that he has an economic plan that will someday create prosperity is a lie. Number two, foreign policy. We essentially have stepped out of NATO in the last few weeks by Trump's now alignment of the United States with the genocidal maniac, Vladimir Putin, who his central driving thing that's been keeping him going all these years is ending the American dominance of the world. Somehow he's decided to go into allegiance with him and an alliance with him, this guy that hates America, as opposed to all of our traditional allies. And what it means is that we no longer can really count on Europe and Canada and our allies to protect us if we come under attack, because we've essentially walked away from what has been the security architecture that's kept America safe, for generations. And so we are far more exposed today to a hostile foreign attack of some kind than we've been potentially in hundreds of years, and certainly in many generations. He's made us less safe already. He's also by creating the chaos in Washington and disabling our government, putting our air traffic control system into jeopardy, all these things. He's also making us less safe and less secure. He's turning off all the parts of the government that prevent Russian sabotage in the United States and in Europe, right? All this collaborative efforts that we had to make sure there wasn't cyber attacks and penetration of our grid and all the other pieces of this. He's turning off all our global communications networks that promoted democracy all around the world, challenging Russia and China. Those are all being turned off. He's eliminating USAID, which was the way that most countries in the world interacted with the United States, a beneficent United States, a generous United States that was there. Not only is he turning it off, but by removing these programs with no warning, he's actually, literally going to kill millions of people in our name and destroy America's reputation potentially for generations in hundreds of countries around the world, or 100 countries that USAID is in. He's alienated our allies. There's no scenario when you look at all this, by moving our alliances from our Asian alliances and our European alliances and North America that we've built here, the economic and security corridor we have in North America, to now aligning with Russia and Iran. There's no version of that makes us safer and more secure and more prosperous. So his argument that he's got a foreign policy that is going to make America stronger and better is a lie. It's a rancid lie. It's a huge fucking lie, and we have to challenge it at every moment. Third, democracy. We all know, right? What is there need to be said? Liberties are evaporating. People are disappearing from the United States without due process, and the administration is fighting this with incredible intensity. They're wiping away the achievements of women and people of color, from government, celebrating the great diversity. Remember, one of the founding slogans of America was "E pluribus unum," from many one, celebration of diversity and the strength of our differences to make us a strong nation. They're rejecting all of that. It's an incredible abandonment of the American creed. And so we know that our democracy is under threat in unprecedented ways. What's been remarkable is how much, and this is something Rob Shapiro mentioned when he visited us a few weeks ago, is that his optimism about this moment was that we, unlike other countries, we have so much history in a democracy and operating in a democratic manner. It's so built into our muscle memory, into our institutions, that and given the size of the country, it was going to be harder for there to be a fascist coup against our democracy in the way that's happened in other countries. And you're seeing the courts now really, and judges, by the way, there was an analysis done, the decisions being made against Trump are equally Republican, Democrat, and independents, right? There's not an ideological bent to this so far. But the courts have done a remarkable job, and Trump has had a loss after loss after loss. And as we've discussed here, what's really important is that Trump is sees the world through winning and losing, strength and weakness, which is why we have to keep introducing this concept of him losing, being weak, not being strong, right? He's a weak man, a big blubbery baby man, as I used to say during the election, not a strong man. He's a loser, not a winner, right? We have to really attack this notion of him being strong and successful and replace it with betrayal and weakness and losing, right? As a way of understanding. Look how he's losing, right? They're losing in court. He's been rebuked by the Supreme Court by John Roberts. Supreme Court ruled against them. They're being told now they have to rehire 24,000 federal workers. They have to reopen USAID. The judges are becoming more aggressive at recommending aggressive, um, to deal with the problems that they've created. And you're seeing him start to lose it, right? He attacked the judges again. The judges are now all worried about their security. We're entering a very dangerous moment in this, but it's important to recognize that he's losing, 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 because the idea that a, a leader of any democracy could just decide that the budget that was signed by a president or a leader and by Congress, that he could just unilaterally change all of that. There is no version of a democracy where that could happen, because then there'd be no reason to have the legislative branch. And so we're looking at such a profound betrayal of our constitutional order, of just the whole idea of democracy. Musk and Trump have this manic campaign to destroy the American government, to rip apart to betray our constitutional order, and to align themselves with Russia, right? I mean, it's just an incredible thing that's happening. It's hard to talk about it, right? It's hard. I mean, I appreciate all of you being here tonight, actually wanting to talk about it, because in some ways it's so devastating, the level of betrayal that we're seeing, by our leaders, because it's not just Trump, right? There's lots of them who are involved in all this, Musk and with him. And so I think now, for me, I'll just say two things about what we do now. Number one is that, we have done a good job as Democrats at sort of living in this place around the economy. And Trump's numbers have come way down. I've been writing about this all week. We had more numbers from the Economist YouGov poll today that I've been writing about for the last week. There was a 5-point drop in Trump's job approval today in the Economist YouGov poll in 1 week, in what is a steady, sturdy poll that doesn't move around very much, that comes out every Wednesday. He's now dropped 11 points in that poll. Morning Consult, he's dropped 10. His approval rating is plummeting. And it's particularly plummeting on economic issues. And what will happen is his job approval is low and on the economy. It's a little higher overall. And that's because there's a limit to how quickly people are going to have buyer's remorse in him. People just voted for him, and they're not going to immediately abandon him. They may be unhappy with the economy and his economic stewardship, but still kind of holding on to his job approval. But over time, these things will, they'll converge. And so underneath his approval rating, the foundation of Trump's brand, as I've been writing about, which is this idea that for, the 25% or so of non-MAGAs that voted for him, those people voted for him to a great degree because what he represented was a successful business guy, a winner, somebody who's going to allow you to make more money in your life and have a better life. And he's burned all that quickly by his reckless economic strategy. And you're seeing very dramatic movement. And as I pointed out this week in the University of Michigan, Consumer Confidence Survey, which is sort of the gold standard survey, the consumer confidence on Friday was the lowest that we've seen in 45 years. And, it's incredible that Trump drove it down this much, right? During his first presidency, the University of Michigan consumer confidence was up around 100. It goes from, like, I think the scale is like 50 to 120 or something, right? However they do this. Trump was up at 100. He's at 58. I mean, his brand, for the first time since he got into the election in 2015, people no longer necessarily believe that with Trump that he's successful, that he's a winner. The chunk that's available to us, right? 75% of his voters are not available to us, and we can't worry about them. We got to worry about peeling off the 25% that wandered into his world, largely, I think, due to this idea that things had not been so good under Biden and we needed a better path. He's betrayed that immediately, profoundly, and it's having a huge impact. And he's a far weaker politician than he was. And so I think Democrats have been right to stay heavily focused on the basket of issues around the economy and the struggle of everyday people and his betrayal of them. But we have to open up the second front that I talk about all the time. What is urgent now is that we have to put the issues of his attack on our government, the trampling of our constitutional order, the embrace of Putin and alignment with a genocidal maniac and abandonment of all of our allies and democracy, and more profoundly, we need to put these front and center in front of the electorate. I think this is the urgent, big next thing Democrats have to do. And certainly, I think Alyssa Slotkin did a very good job a couple of weeks ago at sort of laying that out in her remarks, that we have these other things in addition to the economy that we must do. She broke them down as national security and preserving democracy. There's enormous urgency to this because, as I said, they are breaking things that are going to be very hard, if not impossible, to repair. And so there is tremendous urgency for our leaders to open up the second front. Third is that I do think there are signs of real meaningful progress in this ferocious opposition come together. Not it's been citizen led to this point, right? It's been the calls we've been making into offices, the protests that we're seeing around the country, which have been largely bottom up and not top down, right? These have been local communities. But in the last few weeks, you've started really seeing the DNC, the DCCC, the state chairs, and Hakeem Jeffries and the House Democrats really getting into the game. I mean, let's just go through this, right? In the House, they set up a task force led by Joe Neguse and Jamie Raskin and others to escalate their attacks on Trump's attack on our government and our constitutional order. They filed an amicus brief. They held their first shadow hearing. Hakeem and a group of the leaders of the Democrats, including the member of this task force, did a national town hall with the DNC and Ken Martin that had over 100,000 people participate in it, the largest big single action that any organization has taken so far during this period. They now have launched together in a collaboration the 50 state town halls, the people's town halls. They've already begun. We saw the first two of them this weekend. If you watch my interview with Jane Kleb, she goes through and talks about what they did in one of the first ones in Nebraska on Saturday with Governor Walz. Today, the DNC announced and the DCCC announced that they're now putting up billboards in all these vulnerable battleground House districts where we are putting our firepower on the House side. There's going to be more that's coming, right? There's an escalation. They're doing more. They're innovating. And I think you'll start seeing more and more as Ken Martin gets his sea legs and gets his team in place. You're going to see more and more coming out of them. They've got ads running right now in all of these battleground House districts, right? The House majority PACs um, uh, partner is got ads running. So the House Democrats are on the front foot. They're innovating, they're pushing, and the Senate is not, right? And the contrast between the way the DNC and the DCCC and the House Democrats are collaborating to, start creating a far more effective opposition, and the Senate's struggle to do so has become very apparent. And I think it's why in our work, for those of you who are calling into the offices and contacting your leaders, we need the Senate Democrats have to start stepping up, right? It's unacceptable at this point. Given the House Democrats are giving them a blueprint. They can just join the House Democrats in all this activity. There's plenty of things they can do. And I think that for me, the most important thing in opening up the second front and in the calls that we make into these offices is we should be demanding that Schumer and Jeffries write a letter to America, as I've discussed before, that lays out the injuries and abuses and usurpations of the Republicans and spells out in clear, plain English, 2 to 3 pages for the American people, why they believe that what Trump and Musk are doing is unconstitutional, illegal, wrong, and it must stop. We have to create more space around this argument. It's been underinvested in by our family. We've already begun doing many of the things that we've been recommending at Hopium, right? I mean, if you look at my list of things, right, we have amicus briefs and shadow hearings and with a focus on these 17, battleground districts, that we've seen. Some of these things that we've been recommending are all happening. The major thing that we've been recommending that has not happened is this letter to America. And the second piece is something I discussed with Adam Smith last week, is creating a more organized foreign policy cabinet or national security cabinet that really starts to talk to the American people about Trump's ongoing betrayal of the West and America through his illicit relationship with Putin. These are all things that we can do. These are within our power. And I do feel like we're making progress. And all of you have been working your asses off for your democracy. I'm so unbelievably proud and grateful to be in this fight with all of you, proud patriots who are leaving it all on the playing field every day, for our future, for our families, and our freedoms, right? And I'm just grateful for everything that you guys have been able to do. And so I do think that from where we were, a few weeks ago, I think that my view is that Trump is weaker today than he was. He's stumbling. We're stronger. I think we're making progress in figuring out rhetorically how to engage with all this after a slow start. And just his recklessness and his idiocy and his madness and all the craziness is causing them to make crazy mistakes, eliminating programs that are alienating people all across the country. It's every day. Like, it's incredible what I hear from people about this story, about this program being frozen in this place and people protesting and being angry. They went too far and they have really screwed up. And I think we have to use this outrage that people have to really further weaken Trump and his team and to hopefully slow down the wreckage that is happening in our country right now. And I just want to end with something I've talked about before. You guys have heard me talk about this before, but um, the thing that motivates me every day is my three kids who are 19 and 22 and 24. And I really believe profoundly that what Trump is doing is stealing their future, that they're going to have fewer opportunities. They're going to live in a country that's reviled around the world and not revered. They're going to, economic opportunities are going to be significantly curtailed for all of them. And, that we, as people who are formerly young, who most of the people on this call are tonight, we have an incredible obligation to leave it all on the playing field for our kids and our grandkids, right? And to make sure that they have the same opportunities that we've all had. Because what Trump is really doing more than anything else, right, is he's giving them an America where they're going to have a lot less than we had. And he's doing it on purpose. And it's why there's an urgency to everything we do here. This isn't something that's going to get worked out in the midterms. The amount of damage that he's going to do to the country and to our future and to the future of our kids and our grandkids is going to be incalculable. And we just have to do everything we can to force our leaders to take all of this with much greater gravity and seriousness and to fight as hard as we all are, right? And I think that I feel like we've made progress in this regard in the last few weeks. It may not feel that way, but I feel like we're in a stronger place today than we were a few weeks ago, and they're in a weaker place. And as we talk about here at Hopium, right, you have to have little wins can become big wins, and little cracks can become big cracks if we keep the pressure on. And I do feel like we're making progress, but let's not fool ourselves. This is really hard. And so all of us need to also practice self-care and make sure that we are staying sane, staying healthy. I've joined a gym. I'm working out much more. I feel a lot better physically. I'm using this as a way of channeling my frustration and anger and worry into concrete actions. And the other way that I manage all this is I hang out with all of you every day, right? I mean, you guys have given me this incredible gift that I have a place to go spend all day working on making our country better. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity, and particularly for all the paid subscribers that are watching. All of you and the money that you have given to Hopium have made all this possible. And it gives me this incredible outlet where I feel I'm being put to my highest and best use every day. And that's our goal, right? Is how can we all be put to our highest and best use in this critical time? I know that because you're here tonight, that's why you're here, because all of you guys are working hard. And I just want to end by saying I'm so unbelievably grateful and proud to be in this fight with all of you. Let me get to questions and um, let me, Lincoln. Yeah, I mean, Lincoln's given me a sense of, um, so, good questions as always, right? We're not going to do raised hands tonight. And Lincoln keeps sending me sort of the main themes that you're seeing on the chat. I don't know why my camera does this. It's so weird. I have to figure this out. Um, Yeah, I think, look, I think what's happening is that there's momentum in the Congress to keep doing more. And that there's an awareness they have to keep doing more, and that they're trying things and they're working. And so they're going to do more. And part of it is what I've discussed with all of you is that our job is in our contacts with these offices, the two Senate offices, the House office every day that we should be contacting if you have the luxury of that time, is that you need to be helping your elected, excuse me, understand what's expected of them now, right? That's the way I talk about this, right? Is that we have to help them understand what's expected of them now, and that we have to help them not just be legislators and executives, but we have to help them become communicators and influencers and leaders of this opposition. This is what we have to do. And I think we've already done a lot of this. I mean, to be honest, if the regular Hopium people here, if you go look at that list of things that we've been advocating for, a whole bunch of those things have happened, right? And in part because I think we are through our work and the work that I do. I mean, I talk to House and Senate folks every day, and there's top staff, and I'm lobbying for all the stuff that I'm writing about. People are reading this, and this is the way things happen, right? An idea has to get, the idea of a daily press conference, which some of you have raised. These things have to get, kicked around and chewed and everything else, and then implemented. And the thing is, what's happening is there's more of a process for all of that happening now. And we've got to give Ken Martin and his team a lot of credit. If you haven't watched the interview with Jane Klebb today, watch it because she goes into great detail. I mean, she's one of the leaders of this new team in the DNC, old and dear friend of mine. We worked with her closely last cycle. And, there she talks about what they're doing, right? And not about like what we're thinking about, but the stuff they're actually doing. And I think that there's momentum, there's bureaucratic momentum behind this kind of innovation and new ambition that we need. I think the weak link right now is the Senate, and we have to keep putting pressure on the senators to, not do what senators do, which is kind of their own thing, right? They have to work in concert with other leaders of the opposition. I mean, part of what I've talked about is that we should want is that Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the DNC and all the party committees work together to take the 6 million of us, and Jane and I have a long talk about this in the video, the 6 million of us, the grassroots groups, the traditional party groups and their allies, the new pro-democracy media, which is flourishing and growing every day, right? And harness us into a new ferocious and effective opposition. This has to be done by everybody. Everyone's part of this. It cannot be, that senators just issue a press release and think that that's going to mean anything anymore. I mean, the other day, for example, there was a great letter from three senators about the crimes that Elon Musk, and I'm forgetting who they were, but asserting that Elon Musk was committing crimes. Why wasn't that signed by every senator in the Senate? Why wasn't that signed by every House member? Why wasn't half of Congress behind that letter? And so what happens is when a letter goes with three senators, as opposed to the whole every House and Senate Democrat, what happens is then it feels like there's an absence as opposed to a presence. You only got three? Why wasn't everybody else on it, right? If this is such a good idea, given the gravity of the moment. And I think that those are kind of old dogs, new tricks things. This is what I've been talking about, right? And I talk about how the Senate and House are some of the oldest institutions in America, and they're very hidebound, right, by tradition and everything else. And we're trying to help them, you know, old dogs learn new tricks. We're helping them learn how to operate now in this new environment. That's part of our job, right? Is to help communicate to them about what's, required of them now. What's happening in the courts? I've gotten questions about the courts. Yeah, look, I mean, it's a brutal battle every day, right? Let me turn off one of my lights. It's a little hot here. In this room I'm in, when the seasons change, the lighting changes and it gets a little bit, I have to readjust. And we're in a brutal battle every day. Part of the whole concept of the letter to America is that the letter to America would be a statement by half of the Congress that what Trump is and Musk are doing is unconstitutional, illegal, and wrong. And it's coming, and that their authorities are being usurped. And as people whose authorities are being usurped and injured, they have an obligation to say this. And then this letter for America could become used in every court case to bolster the argument that others are making that Congress's authorities are being usurped. And the absence of that letter to me has become just devastating in some ways because it's so obvious that in the legal process, if you're a judge and you want to rule aggressively against Trump, you would like to see half of Congress laying out their case for why to bolster your argument. And it makes every ruling by every judge more powerful, which is why we have to be insistent and aggressive about demanding that the House and Senate Democrats do this. I'm less concerned about the details and what's in it. I'm more concerned about the importance of there being this unified front that what Trump and Musk are doing is unconstitutional, illegal, and wrong. And what's incredible is that we don't have a single statement from all Democrats about this at this point, right? After everything that's happened. This is feels to me like low-hanging fruit, right? Everybody. And I think it's why we have to continue to push it. I love the inspiration that we get from the Declaration of Independence. July 4th is going to be coming up soon, right? And we should be thinking about all of your grassroots groups should be thinking about what we're going to be doing around July 4th, because July 4th is a celebration of our severing our ties from a mad king and the beginning of the process of setting up our democracy. It's going to be particularly poignant in this, given what's happening. And I think that I think this idea that the founding fathers had that they needed to let facts be submitted to a candid world was is very important now, right? And so we have to continue to push our leaders to be more aggressive about this. Um, I want to remind everybody that here at Hopium, right, we're respectful of each other and of the Democratic family at all times, right? And that I'd rather you think about where we are right now as an old dogs new tricks issue, where we're just helping our leaders understand what's required of them now, as they have very hard jobs. It's chaotic. They're as freaked out as anybody, and to acknowledge that we're making progress, but we still have a long way to go here, right? In this. Um, let me let me see. I do want to say that I want everyone to, I didn't say this earlier. This has come up a few times. I just want you to all know that even though it's not being played this way in the media, that Putin has publicly humiliated Trump now repeatedly over the last few days, treating him like he's his errand boy and like the coffee boy. No American president has been treated by a foreign leader the way that Trump has been treated by Putin in the last few days. And this idea that somehow that they're entering into a partnership instead of it being a client relationship where Trump and America works for Putin that's no longer, this notion that we're going to be two equal countries collaborating on the world. That's no longer something that anybody could say. Putin yesterday had a 2-hour call scheduled with Trump at 9 o'clock Eastern time, and he showed up at 10 o'clock. He was at a public event where he was speaking while he was supposed to be on the phone with Trump, and he made jokes in public at a public event. There's video of it on the internet about his host was saying, "You got to go." He's like, "Oh, it's okay. I'd rather be here with you guys hanging out," right? Mocking Trump, humiliating Trump, treating him like a chump. I just want to say this because know the weakness that this is exhibiting to the world and should be exhibiting to us and to other Republicans about how he is docile and has fealty towards Putin. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard said they're very close friends, right? How can you be close friends with a fucking genocidal maniac, right? Like, how's that even within the realm of something that any American leader could possibly say? And this affinity that Trump has, I think the way it's described is this affinity, this friendship. It obviously is not that, right? Putin has got Trump over a barrel for reasons that we don't totally understand. And, America, this is a question of whether or not Trump is surrendering the United States to Putin right now. I mean, these are legitimate and serious things that there should be shadow hearings about. this shadow national security cabinet that Adam Smith and Jim Himes and Chris Coons and Senator Warner and Gene Shaheen are putting together, they need to become far more forceful in this debate, because what we're witnessing now is really the ending of the international order that America built, that's kept us safe and prosperous and free for generations. The gravity of all this is incredible. I mean, there are now meetings happening in Europe about the future of democracy, the war in Europe, that America is not included in, and this is the first time that's ever happened in the modern era, that America has not led these meetings. America is now openly talking about stepping back from the leadership of NATO, right? Because Trump doesn't want to be in NATO. He doesn't see himself allied with Europeans and with Canada. He sees himself allied with Trump, I mean, with Putin and Iran and all these other global dictators. This is a world-altering event, and it is obvious, critical that our political leaders are more aggressive in talking to the American people about this, opening up the second front, and challenging Trump more aggressively for his betrayal of the country. Um, I have not spoken to Heather Cox Richardson about this letter to America. I don't, as I've said to you in various settings, I don't really want to write it. I want Congress to write it. And I feel like I made some progress on that today. We'll see what happens. And Lincoln, other questions have you been that you could summarize? Yes, Jamie Raskin. Look, Jamie Raskin's already written half to three-quarters of it because the House Democrats filed an amicus brief, and so there is already, you know, uh, there's already language that's out there. So the work to develop, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a single letter. It could be a first letter, and there could be a second, more complicated and effusive and well-written letter, and there could be letters to America, not just a single letter, right? But this concept that the House and Senate Democrats must go on record about the usurpation of their constitutional authorities is it's a must, and I think it's a litmus test in some ways of whether they're really serious about fighting Trump. I think the House Democrats are. They're still trying to find their way. I think they wish they had a stronger partner in Senator Schumer and the Senate Democrats right now, and that's just a reality, right? Um, Let me just look at other questions here. That Yeah, look, we are. Somebody's raised about the question of age here. We're an older community because Hopium and Substack, my Substack is a word-based product, right? And we're all still readers. We're all of the age of people that read and write. And I'm not producing tons of 30-second, 60-second, 90-second videos. There's going to be a limit to how much of that I'm going to do. And I don't have to do everything. I don't have to be the guy that talks to young people. I'm the guy who talks to a big chunk of our family. I talk to the political leaders. I talk to all of you. I don't have to become, we don't have to have 10 million people here at Hopium, right? I mean, we're about to hit 150,000 subscribers. I'm really proud of that. We're one of the 30th or 30 or 40th largest Substacks in the whole world, by the way. It's kind of incredible, this little plucky community that we are. And we have over 200,000 people in the broader community when you include what's called following, which is a lesser form of engagement, that Substack has. And my hope is I'd like to get to 200,000, by the summer. I think that's going to be a comfortable and good number. The truth is, every extra person that comes in here, there's a little bit of extra work. People's membership gets screwed up. And so there's a lot of maintenance. Lincoln's here to help me with that. So as the community gets bigger, it also just gets more expensive to manage it. So I'm very comfortable with this being, you know, um, a medium-sized community, and we don't have to become Midas Touch, right? Midas Touch and is doing their thing, and I'm so proud of Ben and Brett and the whole team. I'm really, we, as you all know, those guys. I mean, I've been on Midas Touch a million times. I did a whole event with Midas Touch even before I began Hopium, right? In the early part of 2023, I hosted an event with Courier Newsroom, Resolute Square, Deep State Radio, and Midas Touch that I hosted with all of them to talk about this need to build this new pro-democracy media to respond to the right's information superiority. That's been a major part of this. But I want to remind everybody that it's my view when we talk about the information superiority in the family is that I think one of the most important ways that we counter them is all of you, is the 6 million of you, and giving all of you permission structure and encouraging you to be loud in your networks and your community. I think the greatest power we have isn't Midas Touch and Courier Newsroom and Resolute Square and Pod Save America. It's all of you. And part of what I've, and Jane and I talk about this today, is that, we have to start treating all of you like partners in the fight and not donors to the cause. I mean, one of the reasons that our leaders have been slow to react to this moment is that all of the structure in which they communicate with all of you, the 6 million of you who gave money to the Harris campaign in 2024, the only relationship any politician has with any of you is a request for money. And the people that run all of the email that you receive, they're fundraisers. They're not communications people. So there's actually no system to start turning that relationship into a partnership as opposed to an ATM relationship. We don't, it doesn't, it's not how it's built. And so the reason that you're not being treated like big citizens who want to go to work and help Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries is the people that manage that relationship have no incentive and no structural experience in doing what I'm talking about, right? Which is asking you all to become information warriors and to do events every week, like I do at Hopium to make you smarter and more effective and more capable, right? I mean, imagine Hakeem Jeffries, and I've talked to his team about this, and I think things like this are going to start happening. Imagine if every Thursday night at 8 o'clock there was a House Democrats YouTube show and Hakeem gave a briefing on what happened that week, and then they brought in an expert to talk about the budget stuff, and then there was a more lighter moment perhaps, right, or a couple candidates come on, and every week, right, there's the House Dems TV, and they're just talking to you about and getting you smarter and getting you more connected. I think by the summer there's going to be a huge explosion of that kind of stuff coming from the DNC, coming from the House Democrats, hopefully the Senate Democrats, the Democratic governors, right? There's going to be much more of this kind of TV where they're, getting around the block of the fundraisers to start to develop more intimate and powerful relationships with all of you. I'm certainly, if you listen to my interview with Jane Klebb today, I mean, we talk about this at length. And here I am, like talking with, one of the three or four most important leaders of the actual Democratic Party itself about the need to do all the things we're talking about right now. That's what that video is today, right? It's not like, Simon, who are you talking to? Well, Jane is, the chair of the state chairs. She's the president of the state chairs. She's the vice chair of the DNC. She's very close to Ken Martin. All this stuff, Roger Lau, who's the new executive director at the DNC, used to work for me 20 years ago and is a dear friend of ours. And you'll get to meet Roger. Ken Martin will come on soon. I haven't bothered him. I wanted him to get his sea legs before he came on here. But I do think we're really making a big difference here. And as I've said to all of you, think of yourself as a leader of the movement and the opposition. You're not just a follower. You're not a bee in the beehive, right? You're much more than that. Because when you take actions, you're inspiring others to do it. You're creating both permission structure and social pressure on others to join you. And I think that one of our big goals is to continue to bring more people along in building this opposition movement and making it stronger. Yes, we're all sick of the emails getting us, asking us for money, right? There's no question about that. So I have heard people have asked about Act Blue. I have not gotten definitive. I don't think that people think it's in trouble. I know there's been news reports, and the right wing, you should all know, is obsessed with killing Act Blue. They have been forever because they've never been able to replicate it. Um, there's been some internal issues there. I will get more clarity on that, but Act Blue is not tumbling. It's not falling down. There's not a crisis. There's some turmoil, but that doesn't mean it's not still going to be what it is. But I'm trying to get more information about this, but my preliminary information that I've been getting, and I want you to know this, I'll give you another example, is that, the grassroots fundraising team at the DNC is really good. And, we've raised over $100,000 together for the DNC in the Hopium community, and they reached out to me just to talk about that process. And apparently they are in some kind of significant dialogue to make it easier for the kind of fundraising that I do at Hopium to become common throughout the whole progressive family and the center left pro democracy family, learning from some of the stuff we've been doing, right? How much money we've raised together, and to make tools to make it easier for average people to bundle and raise money for these campaigns or for large organizations. So they're working cooperatively now based to some certain, significant degree based on the success that we've had in raising money in building new tools at Act Blue that will make all this easier for everybody. And I'm really proud of that. And I've been working with a young woman there named Perry who's dynamite and super smart and about how do we take all this passion, this energy, right, and turn it into more concrete action and not just to get beyond this ATM relationship that exists right now, where you're donors to the cause, but you're not partners in the fight. And, I used to had a line, I've been talking about these things for many years, is that I used to have a line that the way that a lot of people in Washington view all of you is that your job is to do a golf clap, right? When the senators and congressmen come into the room, your job is to clap and to give money. And we have to break through that, right? And to get to a place where when we think of the Democratic Party, there's 6 million of us, going to work every day. And you've heard me say this before, the way I used to talk about this is that we have to reimagine the war room. I was in the war room all those years ago with Carville and Stephanopoulos, and as a young guy, and the way you think of a war room today is, 20 sweaty kids drinking Red Bulls and producing TikTok videos. We need to think of the war room as 6 million people going to work every day. I mean, I wrote an entire major story about this or op-ed about this for the New Republic a year ago. And I've been calling on this for years. And I think that the team that's in there now is much more open to this kind of thinking. You see, if you watch the Jane Club video, you see Jane and I having open conversations about all of this, right? And so, I feel like we're gonna, there's a new team, there's a new party. And for those of you on the ground in the States, I just want you to know that I think you're going to see the state and local Democratic parties being much more open to collaboration with grassroots groups than they've been before. There's a new day here, and it's unfortunate that we're not further along, but I think Ken Martin and his team and Jane are creating a culture change as fast as they possibly can. But do watch the video with Jane. I think it will be encouraging to you. Um, this initial endorsements we've made in the House are just an initial set. They are the 7 that we supported last time. We are going to, of course, be open to expanding that, in April. We just wanted to get that done. We have our first interview tomorrow with one of the 7 candidates, Derek Tran, that will be airing on Hopium either Friday or Saturday. I'm not sure yet which. But we're going to be interviewing all 7 of them. It's just a starting place. It's just something I felt we needed to do. A lot of people are freaking out about the House and the Senate, and I wanted to give people an opportunity to channel, frankly, the gratitude they should have for how aggressive Hakeem Jeffries is being, and also to, you know, not allow our only relationship to be that to the House and Senate to be one out of frustration, right? I think it's, I talk about, many of you have heard me say this before, but I think we have to, in this moment, let me talk about this. This is actually very important. It's a good way to sort of bring it to a close tonight. I think that, I'm a student of history and I've been working in democratic politics for a long time. And I have seen a lot. And I've worked inside of the House and Senate. I've worked in presidential races. And I think that one of the most important things, my great advice to all of you, and those of you who are regular readers of Hopium will not be familiar with this argument I'm about to make, is that we cannot allow ourselves to become perpetually disappointed. And what I mean by that is that we can't have unrealistic expectations that our politicians can never meet, right? We can't always be in a place where, magical things can happen that can't happen. I've talked about a lot how there's been, calls for shutting down the Senate and shutting down the government, and yet the people on the Hill are very aware that in a time when our democracy is under assault, doing things to further weaken the legislative branch against the executive branch has enormous risk, right? Doing things to further weaken the executive branch when it's being under assault has enormous risk. And I know these things may feel like sexy and cool, but there's a danger to them too, right? And I think that part of what is really important, I think, as we go forward, and I think we're all aware that there has been a huge escalation in anger, disappointment, frustration with people on our side, is that if we spend our time attacking each other, we will lose. Then the fascists will be in charge for generations. And what I counsel everyone is that you can be frustrated and angry and you have to voice these things. But if it's where you're spending your time and money, you are taking an enormous risk with your democracy. Because we know that the way that fascist movements or authoritarian movements prevail and win and institutionalize is if the opposition factionalizes, right? And becomes where the fighting is internal as opposed against the other guy. And part of what I'm doing here at Hopium every day is that I'm disappointed. I mean, I've raised my disappointments with Senator Schumer. I've put this in writing, right? There are plenty of things that happen. There are other people in various other ideological parts of the party that I'm also disappointed in. I'm just not going to spend my time talking about that. And that's not what I think we should be spending our time on. Trump is the problem. MAGA is the problem, right? Putin's the problem. And yeah, I mean, we're not where we need to be. But do you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem? Do you want to help continue to guide our leaders forward to build this opposition movement? Or do you want to tear things down and cause internal infighting, right? And I think that all I'm saying is that, I was asked today in Hopium is, do I support the call for Schumer to step down? And I don't. Because I don't think it's where we should be spending our time. I think our time should be spending communicating to Democratic senators our disappointment and giving them ideas about what they can be doing to advance, pointing out what the House Democrats are doing, all the stuff I went through tonight. And just my greatest advice to you, and this is also something I've learned as a dad of raising three kids, which, as all of you know, is the hardest thing we all will ever do in our lives. Particularly, I had three teenagers at home during COVID, which was, the hardest thing that I've ever dealt with it, nothing even close to it. Is that I think not creating a condition of self-righteous indignation and being perpetually disappointed may be the single most important thing that this Hopium community can do and be an ambassador for out inside the rest of the family, because there's no question that you're seeing a huge escalation in kind of this impulsive indignity and people anger and expressing their frustration at their leaders as opposed to channeling that against the actual real enemy of democracy, which is the Republicans, right? And it becomes very easy to attack things that you're familiar with. Trump can be scary, and there are lots of people in our family that don't have any experience in running against Republicans. The only races they win are against other Democrats, right? Well, my whole career has been about beating Republicans. That's what I've done. That's the space I've lived in. I was a regular guest for thousands of appearances on Fox News for 17 years, and when I was a younger guy, I've lived in this place of understanding of how to defeat them, to understand their politics and beat them in their politics. And I'll close by reminding everybody that as disappointing as this election was, we beat MAGA in 2018 and 2020 and 2022 and 2023 and the early part of 2024. And we did really well, down ballot. We just didn't win the presidential. And so and we barely lost this election. It was one of the narrowest presidential wins in American history. Our road back, we've beaten MAGA. These are things we have done and can do again. But part of, I think, what is happening now is that we've sort of lost confidence in ourselves, and we've lost our nerve a little bit. And that's why just my advice to you, and you've heard me say this before, choose to be the good coach and not the angry coach. Choose to be the coach that lifts people up and doesn't push them down, right? Our vibe, our philosophy, our way that we engage in the family is to be cheerleaders and to lift people up and to help them reach higher, not to denigrate them and push them down, right? I think this is a big internal thing we're going to have to work through. And I think there are groups in our family right now that are being far too comfortable in spending a large amount of their time attacking other Democrats. Again, I think these are debates. There's a difference between having debates in our family, discussions, and then descending into factional fighting. And we have to be aware of this, right? This fine line, the sweet spot, right, of keeping our family together. Because if we split, it's over. And so I'll end with this, which is that, I feel like we're in better shape today than we were 2 weeks ago. I know that maybe you don't feel that. I do. But we have a lot of work to do. And, there's no place in the world that I would rather be than working with all of you every day. It's just an incredible blessing you've given me. I think we have done a lot of good in a very short period of time. But the most important work we have is in front of us. I mean, our constitutional order in our country is under attack, and our leaders have been slow to respond to this attack. And the question is, what is the best way to get them to step up and continue to do more? I think we have actually really helped the House Democrats figure out steps to take. But now we have to keep going. We have to keep the momentum. We've got to keep the pressure on. And that's why if I could make one ask, right, the ask is if you have the time, is to call your two senators and House members every day. And the reason why is, and it doesn't matter in some ways what you call about, because they not only record the calls that have been made, they recognize the absence of pressure. And when they feel calls dissipating or pressure coming down, particularly for Republicans, it will give them permission to go do bad things. So these offices monitor two things. They monitor the calls and they monitor the absence of calls. And what we can't afford at this moment is we can't afford for them to think for one moment that any of us have backed off this campaign to continue to put pressure on them to raise their game and defend the country the way they should be. They took an oath of office to protect our Constitution, not to defend America against $8 carton eggs, right? And we have to hold them to account for this oath that they've taken. We're not there yet, but we've made progress. And what I just want to say to all of you is that I just think that the work we've been doing is the highest form of patriotism, right? We are going to work every day inside of our democracy, not outside, and trying to push this lumbering old American democracy forward. The stakes are so high, and I'm just so grateful to be in all of this with all of you. Let's keep fighting. And I will say one last thing is that because it's been asked by several people, is that Tug passed away a few weeks ago, and I haven't been able to talk about it because I was going to get too emotional. And many of you have been asking how he's doing because he wasn't well. He did pass. It was peaceful. I was there with him when it happened. I'll be writing this up when I can get to it. But this picture that you see over my head here, he's the patron saint of hopium. And he's up there with all his buddies playing now out in the fields with tennis balls the way he always did here. But thank you for your concern and the questions I've been getting about him. He was one of the great ones, and he'll be with us here every day, inspiring us to do better.